You're listening to the Family Discipleship Podcast, a podcast of training the church. This is Adam Griffin, and I am not here with my co-hosts today. Chelsea and Cassie are not joining me for this conversation. In our last episode, you heard them have a little panel of mothers talking through motherhood. I'm here with another monologue episode to talk about something I'm passionate about. Certainly, not that they're not, but this episode, just me, talking about fatherhood and talking about manhood. We're going to talk about how, the common phrase, a good man is hard to find. And so I want to talk about that. I want to talk about that biblically. First, I want to start off like this. Let's do a little thought experiment real quick. Manhood is certainly something that people are talking about a lot these days, and so is gender in general. So let me start by asking you a question that was posed to me when I was in college, and I found the answer to this pretty fascinating. But think about this for a second. If you woke up tomorrow and you were the opposite gender of what you are now, so if you're a man, you go to bed tonight, you wake up tomorrow, you're a woman. You're a woman, you go to bed tonight, you wake up tomorrow, you're a man. What are three things that would be different about your life? So think about that for a second. If I woke up tomorrow and I'm a woman, what are three things that would be different about my life? So consider that for a second. When I was in college, the professor posed this question to our class. Fascinating results. So we all had to write down our answers, and then we all shared them out loud. So men shared, if I woke up tomorrow and I was a woman, then this, then this, then this, and then similar. Women would share the same thing. And we all thought it was kind of comical, kind of funny, interesting thought experiment. Then the professor pointed out something that was truly shocking. He said, okay, men, I want you to count up of your three things, how many of the changes are positive? If you woke up tomorrow and you were a woman, here's some positive changes. And then women, I want you to count up of the three changes you listed, how many of these changes are positive? And then he asked, okay, men, how many had more positive than negative? And no hands went up. Women, how many had more positive than negative? Every hand went up. That what we saw in this class and what we started then had a really robust conversation around is, at least culturally, the idea was, if I woke up tomorrow and I was a woman, things might be worse for me, or things might be harder for me, or things, I would think the first things that come to mind are what I wasn't able to do anymore, or what I would now have to do because I'm a woman. And for women, the thoughts they wrote down were, now I would finally be able to do this, or I wouldn't have to do that anymore. Some of these things were biological. Some of them were cultural. And while it wasn't universally true, there were some men that had some positives. There were some women that had some negatives. It was universally true that they were outnumbered, that it was more negative than positive for men becoming women, more positive than negative if a woman became a man, which I think revealed something about kind of our cultural idea around these genders, at least the way our society functions typically, or the way we think about it. The men in our culture, it seems like people think, hey, it's good to be a guy. It's good to be a guy. Like you have different freedoms, different opportunities. And so to be a guy means you get to do some things that if you're a woman, you wouldn't have to do. Or maybe you could take it the opposite, say, man, our cultural idea of womanhood is that it's harder to be a woman. It's not as great. Your opportunities aren't as great, or your biology makes your life more complicated and more difficult, or things like that. There's just this idea that men had a strength, a power, and an advantage, and women didn't. And I'm not saying that's true. I'm just saying this was what was revealed by this thought experiment. I don't know what you thought of when I said that. What are the three things you thought of? Hopefully that revealed something for you. But what I want to talk about today, a little bit of our definition, culturally, biblically, of what it is to be a man. We touched on this in the first episode of the season. We talked about raising boys to be men, which I had some great conversations with some of you listeners, especially some local men here, about what that kind of triggered, what kind of nerves that touched on for you as we talked through it. But we have to have some kind of definition of manhood if we're going to talk about what it means to be a father. And this being the week of Father's Day, I thought what better time than this week to talk about manhood and fatherhood specifically. So we have these two kind of conflicting cultural ideas in our culture right now. One we just talked about. There's a cultural idea that for the most part, it's good to be a guy. There's a lot of advantages to being a man. Maybe you think about the Barbie movie, this idea of the patriarchy, that men kind of get to do whatever they want, or they have inherent power in our culture. It's good to be a guy. But you also have this other idea that is very prevalent, that a good man is really hard to find, that it's not common to find a good man, that a good man is rare. I would even say finding a godly man, a good and godly man, is in many ways an endangered species, that there were more before. Seems like there are less now. Seems like their numbers are dwindling in our culture. And I'm not saying any indictment on men. You'll hear me talk about this here in a second, but these are the two cultural ideas we have to hold in some kind of tension here. Now, it's good to be a guy. A good man is hard to find. So if men have power, but they don't wield it well, that's where we find ourselves right now in our culture. That it seems like men have opportunity, advantage, power, and they're not doing great things with it. Probably about 15 years ago, I taught a class on manhood for high school students. And I love teaching this class. I taught it individually for some boys when I was a public school teacher. I just invited some of my students and said, hey, I'm going to teach this class on manhood. Anybody who wants to come after school, let's do it. I taught it to groups of 1, 2, 3 boys at a time, led a couple kids to Christ through it. And I also taught the same little class at the student ministry at the church I was at the time, the Village Church in Flower Mound. And one of the things I would do in the first lesson when we're talking about the definition of manhood, I gave them a list of occupations. And then I would say, which one of these would you consider to be the most manly position? I listed these out. I'll read them to you right now. And I would ask these boys, what do you think is the most manly position? Is it a paramedic, a professional bodybuilder, a college basketball coach, a stay-at-home dad, a concert pianist, a high school student, the governor of the state of Texas, which is where we were, an Army sniper, an underwear model, or a pastor? So I listed myself in there as a pastor. I listed them in there as high school students, and paramedic, bodybuilder, college basketball coach, stay-at-home dad, concert pianist, governor of Texas, Army sniper, underwear model, pastor. Every time I taught this class, this like totally shocking to me, the argument that was had was between what's more manly. Is it an underwear model or a professional bodybuilder? Now, I would think, now I know I'm older, I'm more mature, but this revealed a little bit of the teenage mind, right? Talking to teenage boys and saying, what do you consider to be manly? And their discussion was not about whether it was the leader of the state, the governor of Texas, not about whether it was a man who was a father, not about a spiritual leader. Their argument was, is it like, obviously these two were far and away the most, but what was more manly, to be an underwear model or to be a bodybuilder? So I think that revealed a little bit of what's going on in the mind of teenagers, at least at that time, 15 years ago. I don't know that much has changed, though, with the huge uptick in social media and posting videos of themselves. You know, I mean, just look, I talk to any single woman about what kind of pictures men post of themselves on dating sites. And they'll tell you almost all of them are trying to appear as what? It's not as a leader. It's not typically as a guy who has good friendships. It's not as a guy who's a spiritual leader. The pictures are what? They're guys showing how good they look in the mirror. It's pictures of men flexing. It's pictures of men lifting weights. It's pictures like that. Why is that? It's because something right now, culturally, we think is manly, or define manliness by the physique that you carry. That's what makes you the most manly. That's what, maybe we would say it like this. That's what this generation finds to be most admirable about manhood, which kind of makes sense when you've inundated them with images. We've taught them that what's great is your ability to attract an audience, your ability to attract admiration. And the easiest way to do that as a man is not necessarily through your ability to lead a family or lead an organization. It's to demonstrate your physique in a way that's admirable. Now, of course, that led to great conversations for me with these young men about what I think biblically manhood looks like, what I think culturally it should look like. And of course, the cultural lies they're hearing, that if you can't lift a certain amount, flex a certain amount, or wear a certain kind of clothing, that you're not manly, that something is less than in you. And I'm sure as we compare to a group of women thinking about the same thing, how they feel the cultural admires them or how they find admiration would be greatly, intricately connected to how people view them, how people see them. Men, you know, I just gave a list of 10. I could have done a longer list. And probably today, if I gave the list, the answers would be different and maybe my list would be different. But for us, our definition of manhood has to, as we talk about fatherhood, we have to talk about the fact that our definition of manhood has to be a departure from what this culture has been teaching. It just has to be. This culture is presenting a version of manhood that, if anything, maybe you'd call poisonous or toxic or undermining to what they're trying to accomplish scripturally when they're called into manhood. No, we're not here for some kind of vain personal glory. Manhood biblically is going to be rooted in selflessness. So as we would try to define manhood together, I would talk about really these 6 things. Talk about maturity, that a man is Christ-like. That what we see biblically is the perfect man is Christ. Therefore, a man is Christ-like. Paul says, we talked about this in the first step of the season, when I became a man, I gave up childish ways. In other words, if you want to be manly, you have to be mature. You can't be childish. Childishness looks like indulgent selfishness. So a man is going to grow in maturity. The second thing we talk about is discipline, that a man is self-controlled. This is a fruit of the Spirit, that a man will do hard things even when he does not want to. That's what discipline is, doing the right thing every time, even if it's not the easy thing. So that was one of the lessons we taught on in manhood, fatherhood. Then we talked about what culturally maybe you'd call chivalry. This idea that a man is selfless and servant-hearted. Biblically, we talk about it, humility, having the attitude of Christ, respect towards women and peers and elders. I think part of the reason that our culture would say a good man is hard to find is, listen to me here, this is so important. The reason the culture would say a good man is hard to find is no one has taught this generation of young men how to respect women, how to respect their peers, and how to respect themselves. And so what we see is a bunch of men who are told, if you can gain positive attention, that's going to bring identity, that's going to bring affirmation to your life, instead of saying, no, this life is not about hubris. It's not about making more of yourself. That's not going to bring you the kind of fulfillment your heart thinks it will. What God has called you to is not being self-aggrandized. What God has called you to is being selfless, that you would pursue the attitude of Christ, that a leader is not one who rules over people. That's what the Gentiles do, God says. Jesus says Gentiles use leadership to rule over people. Not so with you. If you want to be great, become servant of all. So one of the critical aspects of a great father, a good man, is going to be humility. It's going to be discipline, chivalry, humility. Then, of course, a good man is going to be a man of integrity. What we're looking for in a good man, right? Isn't this it? If you're godly, you're looking for a man who's moral, who knows right from wrong, who knows what he's called to and pursues it with everything he's got. It's a man that not only is walking with God, but he's fighting for what's right and he's stopping what's wrong. That's what we look for in a good man. And then the last two, these two are connected. This is really rare in our culture, but a good man is teachable. A good man looks for men to lead him, to be discipled. A good man is a follower. If you want to find a good man, find a man who has somebody in his life that he's leaning on and following. Ladies, if you're single and you're dating a guy, one of the great questions you could ask is, hey, who's leading you right now? Who are you following? Whose voices are you listening to? Or what voices are you listening to? If you're married, you're a mom out there and you're married, asking your husband, hey, who are you following right now? Whose words are you reading? Whose messages are you listening to? Or in your life, who are you meeting with? Who you're sharing your heart with, and they're mentoring, counseling, leading you. Men, if you're listening to this Father's Day episode and you don't have somebody who's discipling you, it's not as complicated as it sounds. You don't have to ask somebody to be your best friend for the rest of your life. You just can ask a man, hey, can I take you out for breakfast and ask you some questions about how you lead your family? Or could I come over to your home for dinner sometime? I have a couple. Come ready with questions, ask them, and be led, be challenged, be coached. And then the last aspect I talked through and what it means to be a good man, a good follower, is to be a leader, that a good man is not just a follower, but he's also qualified to teach. Qualified to teach, we're not talking about skill set alone. I'm not talking about that he's a great presenter. We're saying that everybody is called to make disciples. So a good man is somebody who's looking around going, how can I give what God has given me? Can I take the knowledge that I've gained and use it for somebody else? A.B. Bruce would say it like this, that the reason you have wisdom or strength is to help the one who needs to be wise and to help the one who needs to be strong. That's why you've been given what you've been given, that it wouldn't just terminate on you. So let me switch gears for just a second here. So that's a little bit of our definition, a little bit of some of the cultural issue, the cultural question, the cultural tension between, hey, it's good to be a guy and a good man is hard to find. It's not, though, let me explain, not just a cultural question. It's not just a cultural indictment that good men are hard to find. And I want to unpack whether or not I even believe that statement is true here in a second. But there is a verse from which that concept comes in the Bible. This comes from Proverbs chapter 20. It says, many a man proclaims his own steadfast love, but a faithful man who can find? Did you hear that? Proverbs 20, 6-7. Many a man proclaims his own steadfast love. In other words, he says like, no, I'm great. I'm steadfast. I'm steady. I'm firm. I'm a good man, but a faithful man who can find? The next verse says, the righteous who walks in his integrity, blessed are his children after him. In other words, finding a faithful man may not be super common. The Bible says, who can find a man like this? But the good news is, implied in that verse is that a righteous man, when he's found, is a blessing to his church, to his community, and in this verse, especially the next generation. This is such a great verse for Father's Day. Hey, who can find a faithful man? And if you have found a faithful man, ladies, if you're married to a faithful man, gentlemen, if you are a faithful man, what a blessing you are. Amen. Like what a blessing a faithful man is. We believe even secular research is going to show what a blessing a faithful man is. Let me share just a couple stats, but I could go on and on about this. Secular research shows that a good man, or the absence of one, has a huge impact on all kinds of areas, specifically drug and alcohol abuse. The rates for drug and alcohol abuse in kids that are growing up without dads is huge compared to the ones who have a faithful father in their home. Your education outcomes, poverty outcomes, emotional health, crime, all these things have a huge impact from fatherlessness. It's not to say if you don't have a dad, then you're going to be a criminal, you're going to be a drug addict. What the stats show is that if you are a drug addict, it's much more likely than not that you grew up without a dad or that your relationship with your dad was broken. If you are in prison, it's not that everyone who grows up without a dad is going to prison. No, but the stats say that if you are in prison, there's a much greater chance that you grew up without a father. Here's some specifics that are related to some of the areas. Well, just think about it like this. Our church, the church that I pastor, Eastside Community Church, we have a lot of community partnerships, a lot of relationships with local nonprofits that are trying to address some of the systemic issues in our city, trying to have solutions, not just transactional. In other words, not just giving somebody a meal because they're hungry, trying to help them with job training so that they don't need a meal provided. But in a lot of these areas, a lot of the ministries that we're involved in are impacted by the lack of good men in our community. We mentor fatherless children in our community, a great relationship we have with Forerunner Mentoring, which mentors fatherless kids in the neighborhood we're in Lake Highlands. In America, 43% of children don't live with dad. We, in our church, we help women in crisis pregnancies. You know what the number one reason given for why a woman is getting an abortion? Research has shown that the number one reason women give is the lack of a supportive partner. In other words, the reason they want to terminate their pregnancy, take the life of their unborn child, is because they're saying, I feel like I will have to do this alone. And if I had a supportive man, a man who wanted to father these children, a man who wanted to parent them, then I wouldn't be in this crisis. But the crisis has come from the lack of a supportive partner. That's self-reported by women getting abortions. In our community, we minister to men who are coming out of prison through Rod Ministries. We love Rod Ministries and Dr. Parker. If you're here in Dallas, it's one of it's not touted enough. It's not known enough. Dr. Parker and Rod Ministries, the Reconciliation Outreach of Dallas. Listen to this one. 92% of men in prison are fathers. So almost all the men in prison are dads. That means they are removed from their family while they're in prison. Kids without dads at home are between 3 and 20 times more likely to end up incarcerated. In our community, we also help out people who have been impacted by sex trafficking, helping those people who are victims of it, certainly trying to help prevent it. And where does sex trafficking come from? Almost 100% of the customers of people who are being trafficked are men. You can talk about the prison population. We can talk about the statistics on abuses. We can talk about all kinds of things. And what you will come back to over and over again is that societally, you're going to see men. Even a couple weeks ago, I was at a local restaurant here in Dallas, and I was walking to my car, and about 5 cars away, these 3 men in masks came just kind of sneaking out, just kind of like crouched down and kind of walking back to the car. They're wearing masks. I could tell, obviously, they're up to no good. Like, nobody walks like that and is wearing a mask if you're not doing something you shouldn't do. And they climb into a car where another man's already driving, and they drove away. And of course, I went and talked to the manager and told them, like, hey, it looked like guys were breaking into cars in the parking lot. But this thought crossed my mind. If it had been 3 women in masks with a woman driver, how shocking that would have been to me, right? Like, it just would have been totally unexpected. I know that women commit crimes. Listen, we can talk, and this episode's about a good man is hard to find. The truth is, we could do an episode about a good woman being hard to find. We could do a whole episode talking about how, hey, women, there's opportunity here to say culturally we've misdefined this. We've missed the boat on what this should be biblically. We could do that. But what's interesting, if I told that story about 3 men kind of lurking around the parking lot, getting a car, another man driving away, nobody in our culture would go, wait, men were doing that? Men? But if I told the story and I said, hey, these 3 women were wearing masks, breaking into cars, and they got into this car with this woman driving away, it might be headline news to go, what, 4 women breaking into cars? That just seems culture. That's just mind blowing. In a secular mindset, you would go, that doesn't sound like something women would do. But hey, that's not unfamiliar to our culture that men are doing that. And why is that? Why is there not a comfort level, but kind of presumption of like, yeah, that's something that men would do, but it's not typically something you'd think of women doing those things. And that brings us back to our kind of main question of this episode. So if a good man is hard to find, what impact will that have? And then what listeners are we going to do about it? If a good man is hard to find, I have 3 solutions for you, 3 things I think we should do. These are all coming from the book of 1 Thessalonians, the letter from Paul to Thessalonica. And I'm going to do them in alphabetical order, A, B, and C, the ABCs of what I think we need to do about the fact that a good man is hard to find. First of all, first one comes from 1 Thessalonians 5:11. It says, therefore, encourage one another, build one another up, just as you're doing. If a good man is hard to find, then when you find one, let's appreciate him. Isn't that what Father's Day is all about? If you have a man at home and he's a good and godly man, let's celebrate that. Let's not make much of him saying like he's some kind of magical creature. He's some kind of unicorn. No, there's a lot of good, godly men out there. But when you find one, since sadly it seems like good men are hard to find, faithful man who can find, when you find one, let's appreciate him. Because of a lot of things I've mentioned in this episode, you may even think I've done this in this episode. I hope I haven't. It is so easy in our culture to bash men. So easy. I mean, there's entire podcasts that are just about bashing men. They're about tearing down manhood, about shifting manhood away from what it's traditionally been and taking things that maybe even God established in manhood and calling those toxic. Now, I do believe there's toxic masculinity, whatever you call it. There's ways that men behave that they shouldn't. Mansplaining, toxic, like all these words that our culture has kind of adapted to say men are not behaving well. And I agree, men do not behave well to a degree. But when we swing all the way to like men are the worst, when our cultural media, when the TV shows and movies we have present men basically as bumbling fools, idiots, and villains, we say this is what men are. I get it. There are dangerous men. And there are a lot of them. I do not just trust a man blankly, but listen to me. So many men that I know are good, godly men. I Love them. There's so many churches I've been to when what the solution to talking about manhood is bashing the men there. They're saying, where are all the good men? Where are all the good men? I'll tell you what, when I stand up there at Eastside, I look out at our congregation and I see good men. I see faithful fathers. There's this home group of single men at our church led by Adam Lishman and now Connor, who sit up in the first couple rows of Eastside every week while I'm preaching. They sit together and I love it. They set the tone for what it looks like to follow Jesus as a man. And while there's a lot of churches, I've been a part of churches who look out and go, where are you, single men? What's your problem, single men? I'm so grateful to have found good, godly men. It doesn't mean every man out there needs to be appreciated for his maleness. It's not just his gender that needs to be appreciated. So love him for that. No, but when you find a godly man, and there are many of them, let's appreciate them. Like Paul says, let's encourage one another, build one another up. You know what's harder than bashing men in this culture? Building them. It's easy in this culture to whine and complain about what men are like, to paint a picture of men that is negative. But what if this Father's Day we committed to saying, hey, instead of all the negativity that I could hold against maleness or hold against fathers or even my own father wounds, what if I forgave and just said, I just want to be a person who, instead of bashing and complaining, I build. I think that's something we see in Christ when he interacts with men. We see him being a builder of men. We don't see him whining. We don't see him complaining. But if good men are hard to find, when you find one, let's encourage him. Let's start that this weekend. Then the second one comes from 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, 11 and 12. For you know how, like a father with his children, we exhorted each one of you, encouraged you, charged you to walk in a manner worthy of God, who calls you into his own kingdom and glory. He describes fatherhood here. He says, like a father with children, we exhort. That's like this. We speak courage into, and then encourage, which literally means we're putting courage into you. We are taking something and molding it, building it. So the second one of the ABCs, the first one is appreciate. The second one is build. Let's build a new one. Every time my wife, Chelsea, was pregnant, I prayed that God would give us a son. And every time we went into the ultrasound and found out the gender of our baby, it was a son. And every time I celebrated. And let me explain a couple things. First of all, I know some of you like to wait to be surprised until the baby is born, and that's fine. I support you in that. Chelsea and I have always wanted to be surprised as soon as possible. It's a surprise whenever you find out. So we find out the ultrasound and we delight in that. I prayed for a boy every time, not because I don't like women, not because I don't want to raise a daughter, not because I was afraid of raising a daughter. I know that since good men in this society, this generation, are hard to find, I prayed every time, God, if you want us to raise some godly men, then God, I would be delighted to have sons. I'd love to be part of the solution that people complain, that people bash, that people whine about, that there's just not good men out there. Lord, help me be part of the solution to say, help me raise godly men. And I certainly, to the best of my ability, am trying to do that with the three sons that God has given me. I love my boys, and it's part of my mission in this life, I believe, like Paul said, to exhort them, to encourage them. If good men are hard to find, then listeners, let's build some. Let's raise some. Let's not just raise boys into males. Let's raise men. Next generation of fathers live under the roof of many of the homes I'm speaking to right now. This is what Paul describes fatherhood like, charging our children to walk in a manner worthy of God. Doesn't that sound just like what a good man would be? Someone who's walking in a manner worthy of God. So I want to paint a picture for my sons of what that looks like. I want to call you listeners to commit to the same. And then lastly, A is appreciate, B, build a new one. And then C comes from 1 Thessalonians 5:14. It says, we urge you, brothers, admonish the idle, encourage the faint-hearted, help the weak, be patient with them all. Admonishment is a big word that means correction, means to help by teaching. So the C word here, if it's appreciate, then build one. The C word is correct a potential one. If good men are hard to find, then where we find men that are not good, isn't it the church's role meaning you, not I'm talking about the church staff, I'm not talking about church leadership, you, the church of Jesus Christ, isn't it your role to correct the ones who would be good men if someone would just invest in them? If someone would just teach them? If someone would just admonish them and encourage them? I've had this conversation with neighborhood kids. I've had this conversation with kids in my church. I've had this conversation with full-grown men. Where you are not pursuing Jesus, let me help you. Where you are not following, where you have not been led before, maybe you had a dad who didn't teach you how to follow God, then let me help you. Now let me connect you with someone who can. Where if good men are hard to find, let's be those who admonish the ones that we meet, that correct them. Proverbs 9:8 says that if the man you rebuke is wise, he will love you for it. If the man you rebuke is wise, if the man you correct is wise, he'll love you for it. I get it. That's not promised. A lot of men do not like to be corrected. I don't know if woman-splaining is a thing. I'm sure like there's probably a hashtag out there, but a lot of men don't love to be talked down to or condescended to or corrected, or they interpret any correction as condescending, as disrespectful. We have such a culture that believes that disagreement is disrespect. It becomes really hard to correct people. But what Proverbs says is if the man is wise, he'll not only listen, he'll not only be teachable, he'll love you for it. So the other parts of this verse, not just about admonishing, it talks about the helping the weak. I get it. There's some men out there that are they're struggling. And it's not that they love being a man who's ungodly, and not maybe that they love being selfish. They need help. So isn't it the church's role to come alongside the culture and not only point to the standard of Jesus Christ, but to help bear one another's burdens the way Christ has called us to say, where this is too heavy for you, let me help you, knowing that no burden can be completely carried by us. That's why Christ says, hey, you can cast all your burdens. Peter quotes it. He says, cast all your burdens unto him because he cares for you. Psalm 55, cast all your burdens. This is the role of the church. This is what we're called to do, not just to be good men and not just to appreciate good men, but to build new men and to correct potential men. So I hope this episode has been a blessing to you. I hope talking about fatherhood and manhood is a blessing to many people. I know it's a contentious topic because a lot of people will disagree, even with some of the things I said today. I know, and let me just qualify this. Some of you have been hurt by men, betrayed by men. Some of you, a man is the villain in your story. Your arch nemesis is a man who maybe has twisted what God said about being a respected father, being a person that should be honored and followed. Maybe they're the one who used that position of authority to hurt you. And for that, I am so sorry. I am not calling you to blindly open yourself up to somebody else's abuses or harsh treatment. I am just trying to say, I see that. And because of that, let's do something about it. Where we find goodness, let's encourage it. Where we find absence, let's build something new. And where we find potential, let's correct it. Well, thanks for listening, friends. If you think it's as important as we do to disciple our families, please help us out by giving us a great review wherever you listen to podcasts. Visit one of our sponsors and share this episode with one of your friends. If you want to keep up with us or join the conversation, you can follow the Family Discipleship Podcast on Instagram and Facebook, or find us at Family Discipleship. We love you, listeners. This is probably our last episode for the summer, and we will see you again with a brand new season this fall.